Have you ever stopped to wonder how someone kind, caring, and ethical could suddenly cross a line and do something cruel? Picture this, a person you admire, someone you trust, slowly shifting into someone almost unrecognizable. Sounds unsettling, right? But here's the twist. It's not some rare phenomenon. Throughout history and psychology, this transformation appears again and again. Ordinary people, people just like us stepping into darkness. In this video, we're tackling one of the most haunting questions about human nature. Why do good people sometimes do bad things? And trust me, the answers will challenge how you see the world and even yourself. Stick with me for the next few minutes because what we'll uncover might completely change the way you think about morality, choice, and human behavior. Now, the concept we're diving into has a name, the Lucifer effect. It was brought into the spotlight by psychologist Philip Zimbardo through the infamous Stanford prison experiment. What he uncovered was deeply unsettling. He showed that the environment we're placed in, the roles we're given, and the authority we follow can twist even the most virtuous among us into doing harm. Think about history. The guards at Nazi concentration camps, soldiers who carried out ethnic cleansing, even neighbors or bystanders who stood silent in the face of unspeakable atrocities. These people weren't born evil. Many were ordinary men and women who got swept up in circumstances that unleashed the darkest corners of human nature. So what's really going on here? Why does this happen? The forces behind it aren't mystical. They're psychological and social, and they influence all of us. The first force is the power of authority. Psychologist Stanley Milgram's obedience experiments in the 1960s revealed something shocking. Ordinary people instructed by a figure of authority were willing to deliver what they believed were painful electric shocks to another person. Most participants kept going even when they thought they were causing serious harm just because someone told them to. Now let me ask you this, how often do we follow instructions in our own lives without really questioning them? Whether it's from a boss, a leader, or even society itself, how easily could we be swayed into compromising our values? And this is only the beginning. Authority is powerful, but there are other forces like dehumanization and social roles that push us further down that slippery slope. And once those forces combine, the line between good and evil gets frighteningly thin. Stay with me, because in the next part we'll uncover how this dehumanization process works and why it's one of the most dangerous tools humans use to justify cruelty. Let's dig deeper into one of the most dangerous mechanisms that can turn ordinary people into agents of cruelty: dehumanization. When we strip others of their humanity, reducing them to labels, stereotypes, or even enemies, it suddenly becomes easier to justify harming them. History shows us this over and over again. Propaganda in wars painted opponents as rats or vermin. Political rhetoric often describes groups of people as invaders or parasites. When someone stops being seen as fully human, empathy vanishes and cruelty feels not only possible, but sometimes even justified. Think about the way language works in today's world. How often do we see groups reduced to just a single word, whether it's outsiders, illegals, radicals, or something else? Every time we buy into these labels, empathy shrinks and division grows. It creates an us versus them mentality where compassion gets locked away and indifference or even violence takes its place. But dehumanization is only part of the puzzle. Social roles and group dynamics play a huge part as well. Philip Zimbardo's Stanford prison experiment is one of the clearest demonstrations of this. In his study, college students were randomly assigned the roles of guards or prisoners. Within just a few days, guards began showing abusive behavior, and prisoners displayed signs of extreme stress and submission. What's terrifying is how quickly individuals lost sight of their personal values and simply acted according to the roles they were given. The experiment had to be shut down early because the situation spiraled out of control. This raises a chilling question: how much of our identity is truly ours? Are we making decisions as free individuals, or are we unknowingly acting out scripts that society, authority, or groups hand to us? And here's the kicker. These forces aren't just things of history or psychology textbooks. They're alive and active in our everyday lives. You can see them at work, in offices where toxic workplace cultures push people to stay silent. On social media, where mob mentality drives pile-ons. Even within families or schools where conformity can override individuality. Recognizing these forces authority dehumanization, and group pressure, is the first step to resisting them. But that leads us to a deeper mystery. What exactly is the tipping point? That exact moment when a good person silently steps across the line into doing harm. In the next part, we'll look at how those small compromises begin the little choices that seem harmless at first, but accumulate until they drag someone far away from their values. So what about that tipping point, the exact moment when a good person slips across the line into doing harm? It's rarely a dramatic, sudden transformation. More often, it starts with small compromises. Maybe it's choosing to stay silent when you witness something unfair. Maybe it's agreeing to go along just this once because resisting feels risky or inconvenient. At first, those choices seem minor, but over time they stack up. Each compromise makes the next one easier, and before you realize it, you're standing in a place you swore you'd never reach. This is what psychologists call the slippery slope. Once you begin sliding, momentum takes over. Think of people who participated in historical atrocities. Not all of them jumped straight into horrific acts. Many began with tasks that felt small, following orders, enforcing rules, or simply not speaking out. But step by step, they crossed deeper into moral darkness. Now pause for a moment and reflect. Have you ever made a choice that went against your values because it felt easier, safer, or less confrontational? Maybe you laughed along at a cruel joke. Maybe you ignored a situation that felt wrong because you didn't want to cause trouble. The truth is, these are the kinds of moments where the line begins to blur. The danger is how ordinary these moments feel. Nobody wakes up one day and says, "I'm going to abandon my morals." It's the quiet, almost invisible choices, the silence, the rationalizations, the willingness to look the other way that create the real risk. And that's why awareness matters so much. If we can spot these moments before they spiral, we have a chance to stop the slide. The challenge is not everyone recognizes these turning points. Some people believe they're immune to the pull of darkness, that only other people fall prey to it. But here's the uncomfortable truth: none of us are entirely immune. Under the wrong circumstances, anyone can get caught in the Lucifer effect. In the next part, we'll confront this head-on. Are there people who can truly resist these forces, or is the danger something every single one of us must face? Here's a question that lingers in almost everyone's mind. Are some people truly immune to the Lucifer effect? Can certain personalities or moral strengths protect someone from slipping into cruelty? The unsettling answer is this: none of us are completely immune. Psychologists have debated for decades whether certain traits like strong empathy, deep self-awareness, or unwavering moral courage can act as protective shields. And yes, these traits do help. But under the right, or rather the wrong set of circumstances, even the most principled individuals can falter. Think of it like this: inside each of us exists the capacity for both great kindness and unspeakable harm. This isn't just a theory, it's a theme woven throughout literature, religion, and philosophy. The Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung called it the shadow self, the darker, often hidden aspects of our psyche that we'd rather not acknowledge. Maybe you've caught a glimpse of it before. A surge of envy so sharp it startled you. An outburst of anger you regretted the moment it left your lips. Or perhaps a decision made in the heat of the moment that clashed completely with your values. Those are flashes of the shadow. Left unchecked, that shadow can grow and align frighteningly well with the Lucifer effect. But here's the hopeful side: awareness is our greatest defense. By shining a light on these hidden parts of ourselves, by admitting that we're capable of darkness, we actually gain more control over it. Jung argued that true growth comes not from denying the shadow, but from confronting it and integrating it into our conscious awareness. This means asking ourselves tough questions. What are the emotions I avoid acknowledging? What parts of myself am I afraid to confront? Facing those truths isn't comfortable, but it's essential if we want to resist manipulation and moral collapse. Still, self-awareness alone isn't enough, because there's another force at play, one that sneaks in quietly and justifies harmful actions while allowing people to feel guilt-free. Psychologist Albert Bandura gave it a name: moral disengagement. And in the next part, we'll break down how moral disengagement works, why it's so dangerous, and how it shows up in everyday life without us even realizing it. Now let's talk about one of the most insidious psychological mechanisms of all: moral disengagement. This concept, introduced by psychologist Albert Bandura, explains how people can commit harmful acts yet convince themselves they're not really doing anything wrong. In other words, it's the mental trick we play on ourselves to silence guilt and keep our conscience quiet. Think about the excuses we've all heard or maybe even used ourselves. Everyone else is doing it. It's just this one time and the ends justify the means. These rationalizations create distance between our actions and our values, allowing us to keep seeing ourselves as good people, even while doing things we know are harmful. Take a student cheating on an exam. They might tell themselves, it doesn't matter, it's just a small test. Or consider a manager who treats employees unfairly, justifying it by saying, I have to hit targets for the good of the company. These little narratives act like a shield protecting us from feeling remorse while we step further away from our core principles. So what's the antidote? Psychologists suggest something called moral vigilance. It's the habit of pausing and asking yourself tough questions. Am I justifying something I know is wrong? Am I minimizing the impact of my choices just to feel better about them? And here's where another powerful counterforce comes in: empathy. When we see others as fully human with their own fears, hopes, and dreams, it becomes so much harder to justify harming them. This is why art, storytelling, and real human connection are so important. They remind us of our shared humanity and break down the barriers of us versus them. But individual defenses like empathy and vigilance aren't the whole picture. Because beyond the personal level, there's a bigger question: what about the systems we live in? What about the leaders, governments, and cultures that can either nurture compassion or normalize cruelty? History has shown us that leaders can shape entire societies for good or evil. Adolf Hitler manipulated fear and prejudice to justify atrocities. Meanwhile, figures like Mahatma Gandhi or Martin Luther King Jr. used their influence to inspire nonviolence and justice. That raises an important question for each of us: who do we choose to follow? And what influence do we have on the people around us? Because even if we're not in positions of power, every one of us carries influence at work in our communities, in our families. In the next part, we'll dive deeper into the role of leadership influence and how the battle between good and evil isn't just out there, it runs through each of us every single day. Up to now, we've seen how authority dehumanization, group dynamics, and moral disengagement can push ordinary people into extraordinary acts of harm. But here's the truth: the battle between good and evil doesn't just exist out there in history or in other people. It runs right through each of us every single day. And this is where leadership and influence come into play. Think about it: a single leader can change the moral compass of an entire society. Adolf Hitler weaponized fear, hatred, and propaganda to justify genocide. On the other hand, leaders like Mahatma Gandhi or Martin Luther King Jr. chose a radically different path. They used their voices to inspire courage, compassion, and nonviolent resistance. The difference wasn't just in their words, it was in the example they set and the values they embodied. But leadership isn't only about people with titles or power. Each of us influences the world around us. You may not lead a country, but you shape the culture in your family, your workplace, your community, even online. The way you treat others fairly or unfairly sets a tone that ripples outward. So here's the question: what kind of influence are you having? Are you reinforcing harm and division, even in subtle ways? Or are you planting seeds of kindness, fairness, and integrity? Pause and reflect. Who do you look up to in your own life? What values do they represent? And just as important, what kind of example are you setting for the people who look up to you? Because this isn't only about resisting harm, it's about actively creating good. The same mechanisms that turn ordinary people into perpetrators of cruelty can also turn ordinary people into heroes. Circumstances shape us, yes, but they also give us chances to rise to act with courage and integrity when it matters most. This brings us to a crucial shift in our journey. Recognizing the forces that drag us downward is important, but awareness alone isn't enough. To truly resist the Lucifer effect, we need strategies. We need tools to practice resilience, to build moral courage, and to strengthen empathy in our daily lives. In the next part, we'll explore exactly the practical strategies you can use to recognize danger signs early and resist the psychological forces that pull us away from our values. Awareness is powerful, but by itself, it isn't enough. To truly resist the pull of the Lucifer effect, we need actionable strategies. And at the heart of these strategies lies something called moral courage. Moral courage is the ability to stand up for what's right, even when fear, pressure, or personal loss are staring you in the face. It's what drives someone to speak out against injustice, protect someone vulnerable, or admit a mistake when silence would be easier. Here's the key: moral courage isn't something we're born with. It's something we cultivate. Think of Rosa Parks refusing to give up her seat, sparking the civil rights movement. Or whistleblowers who exposed corruption, often at great personal cost. They felt fear just like anyone else, but they acted anyway. So how do we build this kind of courage in our own lives? It starts with clarity. Identify your core values, the principles that matter most to you: honesty, compassion, fairness, accountability. Reflect on past choices. Did you live up to those values or did you compromise them? That awareness gives you a moral compass to navigate tough situations. Another practical exercise is mental rehearsal. Imagine yourself in difficult scenarios. What would you do if you saw someone being bullied at work? How would you respond if pressured by a superior to cut ethical corners? By visualizing these situations in advance, you prepare your mind to act decisively when those moments arrive. But courage doesn't grow in isolation. We need support. Building strong connections with people who share your values creates a buffer against negative influences. Surround yourself with principled friends, mentors, or communities. They'll remind you of who you are when pressure tries to make you forget. And don't underestimate the ripple effect of small acts. Speaking up against unethical practices in the workplace might feel risky, but your voice can inspire others. Choosing kindness in an everyday interaction might seem minor, but it chips away at cultures of indifference and dehumanization. At the same time, we need to stay alert to our surroundings. This is called situational awareness. Pay attention to group norms. What behaviors are being tolerated or encouraged? Ask yourself, am I going along with this because it's right or just because everyone else is doing it? In the next part, we'll dig into two more critical defenses: self-reflection and the practice of cultivating a heroic imagination, a mindset that can transform ordinary people into extraordinary forces for good. If moral courage is the foundation, then self-reflection is the compass that keeps us aligned. The philosopher Socrates once said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." And when it comes to resisting the Lucifer effect, that wisdom couldn't be more relevant. Self-reflection forces us to pause and ask the hard questions. What motivated my actions today? Did I treat people with respect and empathy? Were there moments I stayed silent when I should have spoken up? These questions aren't about perfection, they're about progress. By examining ourselves regularly, we train our minds to act with greater intention instead of drifting with the current. But reflection alone doesn't shield us from corruption. We also need to develop what psychologist Philip Zimbardo calls the heroic imagination. This is the mindset that allows ordinary people to take extraordinary action when moral challenges arise. It's the belief that heroism isn't reserved for saints or superheroes. It's something accessible to everyone in everyday life. Think about it: standing up for a coworker being mistreated, defending someone being excluded, or even choosing honesty in a moment when a lie would be easier. These are small acts of heroism, and small acts add up. One person's courage can inspire others, sparking a chain reaction that changes entire environments. Studying the lives of heroes, both historical and modern, can also feed this imagination. Whether it's Rosa Parks, Oskar Schindler, or a neighbor who quietly supports their community, these stories remind us that courage and compassion are within reach. They make heroism feel less like an impossible ideal and more like a daily choice. But there's an even deeper realization waiting beneath all of this: the line between good and evil isn't something that runs between different groups of people. It runs straight through every single human heart. As the writer Alexander Solzhenitsyn put it, the battle line between good and evil runs through the heart of every man. That realization is both humbling and empowering. It reminds us that every moment is a new opportunity to resist cruelty and choose integrity. In the next part, we'll turn this insight into practice, exploring specific steps you can take starting today to not only resist the Lucifer effect, but to actively become a source of light in a world that desperately needs it. At this point, we've explored the forces that drag good people into darkness: authority, dehumanization, group dynamics, and moral disengagement. We've also uncovered personal defenses like moral courage, empathy, and self-reflection. Now the question becomes, what can you actually do starting today to live these ideas out in real life? The first step is to recognize something many of us overlook: your influence matters. Even if you don't feel powerful, every action you take, every word, every choice shapes the environment around you. In a workplace, at home, or online, you're helping set the tone. Are you fostering kindness, fairness, and accountability? Or are you silently allowing harm to go unchecked? History gives us powerful reminders of how even one individual can make a difference. Take Oskar Schindler, a German industrialist during the Second World War. At first, he was motivated by profit, but when confronted with the reality of the Holocaust, he made a different choice, using his resources to save the lives of over 1,000 Jewish people. His story shows how even in the darkest chapters of history, one person's decision to act with humanity can ripple outward in extraordinary ways. Now, most of us won't face choices on such a monumental scale, but that doesn't mean our decisions don't matter. Speaking up when you see unfair treatment in your office, supporting someone who feels isolated, challenging harmful stereotypes when they come up in conversation. These may seem like small acts, but multiplied across communities, they create real change. Another vital step is education. Knowledge is one of the strongest defenses against manipulation. Study history, psychology, and philosophy to understand how people fall into moral collapse and how they resist it. Share what you learn with others, not to lecture, but to spark meaningful conversations. Films, books, even the news we consume, all shape our sense of right and wrong. By choosing stories that broaden your perspective and encourage compassion, you train yourself to resist narrow, divisive thinking. But here's a reality check: standing up for what is right often comes with consequences. Social rejection, professional setbacks, even personal loss. That's why the next piece is so important. Resilience. In the next part, we'll dive into what resilience really looks like, how to build it, and why it's the secret ingredient to standing strong when the world pressures you to compromise. Resilience, the ability to keep going when the world pushes back, is what allows us to actually live our values when it's hardest. Standing up for what's right almost always carries some form of risk, being judged, rejected, punished, or even losing opportunities. So resilience isn't about avoiding fear, it's about continuing to act in alignment with your values despite that fear. But how do we build it? One way is through mental and emotional practices. Mindfulness, journaling, or simply setting aside time to reflect helps us process stress before it overwhelms us. Meditation can train the mind to stay calm under pressure. Journaling can clarify what we really believe and why it matters. These practices don't eliminate fear, but they make us steadier when fear shows up. Resilience also thrives in community. None of us are meant to stand alone forever. Surround yourself with people who inspire you, who lift you up, and who remind you of your values when you're tempted to forget them. Supportive relationships create accountability and encouragement. When one person feels weak, another can help carry the load. Still, even with resilience, we're human. There will be times when we fail, when fear wins, when we stay silent, or when we make choices we regret. And that's where another essential piece comes in: self-forgiveness. Self-forgiveness doesn't mean excusing harmful actions. It means acknowledging mistakes, taking responsibility, and committing to do better. It means refusing to let guilt trap you in shame and inaction. Think of it as breaking the cycle. Without forgiveness, people often double down on harmful behavior just to avoid facing the pain of regret. With forgiveness, failure becomes a lesson instead of a life sentence. Reflect for a moment: is there a time you fell short of your own values? Did you learn and grow from it, or did you let it define you? The ability to forgive yourself and others is one of the most powerful tools for breaking free from the Lucifer effect. And all of this leads us to the most profound realization of all: the recognition of our shared humanity. The line between good and evil doesn't divide nations or groups, it runs through every human heart. In the final part, we'll bring everything together. We'll explore how to apply these insights in daily life and how each of us can become a steady force for good in a world that desperately needs it. We've now reached the end of this journey, and the most important realization of all: the battle between good and evil isn't fought on distant battlefields or hidden in history books. It's fought inside each of us every single day. Every choice you make, no matter how small, ripples outward. The way you speak to a coworker, the way you respond to someone who disagrees with you, the way you treat strangers when no one is watching. These moments add up to the culture we live in. The question is, are your choices building division and harm, or are they building connection, compassion, and integrity? Think about it this way: you don't need extraordinary circumstances to make a difference. You don't need to be a world leader or a hero from the history books. You can start right where you are at home in your community online. Speak up when you see injustice. Offer support when someone feels invisible. Refuse to let stereotypes dictate how you treat others. These may seem like small steps, but multiplied across millions of lives, they have the power to transform entire societies. Another key is education and awareness. Keep learning. Study history, psychology, philosophy. Understand the mechanisms that drive cruelty and the tools that build resilience. Share what you learn, not to preach, but to spark conversation. The more we illuminate the patterns, the harder it becomes for darkness to take hold unnoticed. But remember, none of us will get it right all the time. We'll stumble. We'll stay silent when we wish we hadn't. We'll make compromises we regret. What matters most is how we respond afterward. Do we hide in shame, or do we forgive ourselves, learn and try again? Growth isn't about never failing, it's about choosing to rise again and again. And at the core of all of this lies one truth: we are all connected. The line between good and evil isn't a wall that divides people, it runs through every human heart. That truth should humble us but also empower us. Because if the battle is within, then the choice is always in our hands. So the next time you're faced with a moral decision, big or small, remember this: you have the power to choose. You have the power to resist the slide into darkness. And you have the power to be a force for good in a world that desperately needs it. The question is, will you rise to that challenge?